The wind came down the mountain like a living thing, clawing at stone and pine, screaming through the narrow passes as if it had learned hatred from men. Long before the storm showed its teeth, the valley already knew fear. It lived in the hollow of ribs, in the way doors were barred before sunset, in the way women lowered their eyes when strangers rode through. This was outlaw country, where mercy was rare and memory was short, and in a crooked cabin pressed against the mountainside, a widow and her dog were about to learn how cruelty echoes longer than laughter. Before this story tightens around your chest, before the storm breaks and fate chooses its victims, take a breath and remember this. Stories like this are meant to be shared. If you feel the weight of it, if it moves you, stand with us. Subscribe to the channel and pass it on to your friends. Let the fire travel. Let the warning live. The widow's name was Ellen Mora. She had buried her husband 3 winters ago when a logging accident crushed him under a rolling pine and left her with a cabin, a scarred pair of hands, and silence that rang louder than any bell. The mountains did not care that she was alone. Snow still came heavy. Wolves still howled. Men still passed through with guns on their hips and hunger in their eyes. The only thing that moved through the cabin with certainty was her dog. His name was Ash. He was not large, not the kind of beast that impressed from a distance. His coat was a mottled grey and black, like smoke frozen in motion. One ear bore a jagged split from a knife or a trap. Ellen never knew which. His eyes, though, were wrong in the way that made people uncomfortable, too aware, too steady. When Ash looked at you, it felt as if he was remembering something you hoped had been forgotten. Ash had belonged to Ellen's husband once. They said the dog had followed him down from the high ridges years ago, limping, half-starved, yet refusing to leave his side. When her husband died, Ash lay beside the body through the long night, unmoving, teeth bared at anyone who came too close. From that night on, the dog's loyalty was not given, it was sworn. On the morning the outlaws came, the sky was iron grey and low, snow threatened but held back, as if the mountain itself was deciding how much suffering it wished to watch. Ellen was hanging washed clothes near the tree line when she heard them, laughter first, sharp and careless. Hooves followed. 6 riders emerged from the trail, their coats dark, their faces wind-bitten and hard. They wore the look of men who had taken what they wanted and survived doing it. Guns were visible, not hidden. Confidence like that was a language of its own. Ash stepped forward without a sound, placing himself between Ellen and the riders. "Well now," one of the men said, leaning low in his saddle. His smile showed too many teeth. "Look what the mountain coughed up. A widow and her mutt." Another laughed. "Dog's got eyes like he's judging us." Aileen said nothing. She had learned long ago that words could invite worse things. The leader dismounted. He was tall, his beard braided with bits of thread and bone. He walked closer, boots crunching snow, studying the cabin, the woman, and finally the dog. "Pretty animal," he said. "Shame it's wasted on a woman who can't protect herself." Ash growled. Not loud, not wild. It was low and precise, like a warning carved into stone. That was when the teasing began. One of the men tossed a rock, not hard enough to injure, just enough to sting. It struck Ash's flank. The dog did not yelp, he did not move. He only turned his head slowly, eyes locking onto the man who threw it. "Oh, I like this one," the thrower said, emboldened. "Thinks he's brave." Another man slid down from his horse and reached out with a stick, poking at Ash's chest. "Dance for us, mountain dog." Ellen's voice finally broke the air. "Please, leave him." The leader raised a hand, half-hearted. "Easy. We're just having some fun." Fun. The word hung there, rotten. They circled Ash, laughing, jabbing, throwing snow and small stones. One man tugged the dog's torn ear. That was when Ash snapped, not biting, not lunging, just a sudden flash of teeth inches from flesh, close enough to feel the heat of his breath. The men jumped back, startled. For a moment the valley went quiet. Then the laughter came back harder. "Got some spirit," the leader said. "You hear that, boys? Dog thinks he can threaten us." He crouched low, eyes level with Ash's. "Listen, beast, we'll be gone soon, but remember this." He tapped his temple. "Remember who stood above you." Ash stared back, unblinking. They left as they came. Noise, arrogance, cruelty trailing behind them like smoke. But before mounting up, one of the men kicked over Ellen's water barrel. Another tore the drying clothes from the line and dragged them through the snow. They rode away laughing, their voices dissolving into the trees. Ellen collapsed onto her knees when they were gone. Her hands shook. Ash turned and pressed his head into her chest, grounding her with warmth and weight. She wrapped her arms around his neck and wept, not loudly, but with the quiet despair of someone who knows the world does not care. That night, the storm arrived. It did not come gently. It came like a verdict. Snow fell sideways, driven by winds that howled like wounded animals. The mountains vanished behind curtains of white. Trails disappeared. Sounds were swallowed whole. Inside the cabin, Ian fed the fire until the wood ran low and wrapped herself in blankets. Ash lay by the door, restless. He rose often, sniffing the air, ears twitching toward sounds no human could hear. Far above, on a narrow ridge trail, 6 outlaws cursed the weather. They had planned to cross the pass before dark, to reach a hunting camp where stolen goods could be traded for drink and warmth. But the storm had other ideas. Snow choked the trail. Wind tore at their horses, spooking them. Visibility shrank to arm's length. Should have stayed in the valley, one shouted. The leader snarled back. And freeze there? Move. That was when the first horse slipped. It screamed as it went down, legs flailing, dragging its rider into a drift. Panic spread faster than cold. Another horse reared. A man fell, striking his head on stone. Blood vanished into snow like a bad thought. In the chaos, none of them noticed the tracks at first. They were fresh, deliberate, too straight for chance. Below, in the cabin, Ash lifted his head. His body went rigid. Something inside him clicked into place. Not rage, not fear, but purpose. Elin stirred. Ash. The dog did not look back. He moved to the door, pawing once, softly. Then again, harder. No, she whispered, dread blooming. Stay, please. Ash turned then, just once. His eyes held something ancient and unmovable. He pressed his forehead briefly against her knee, a promise or a farewell, and before she could stop him, he slipped out into the storm. The wind swallowed him whole. Ash ran not blindly, but with the certainty of a compass needle snapping north. Snow stung his eyes, froze his whiskers, clawed at his lungs. Still, he ran. He followed the scent of men who had laughed at suffering, who had learned nothing from warnings. The mountain did not slow him. Pain did not stop him. Above, the outlaws huddled, trying to decide whether to move or dig in. That was when one of them screamed, not from the cold, from terror. A shape moved at the edge of the storm, low, fast, deliberate. Eyes glinted like embers in the white void. A growl rolled through the wind, deep and knowing. "It's just a dog," someone shouted, voice cracking. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. The mountain storm raged harder, as if leaning in to watch, and Ash came on, carrying memory, loyalty, and a reckoning that could no longer be delayed. This was only the beginning. The storm did not care who was guilty and who was innocent. It punished breath and bone the same way, grinding the mountain into a white, howling graveyard. Snow piled faster than thought, swallowing sound, swallowing direction. Above the tree line, the world became nothing but wind and pain. Ash moved through it like he belonged to it. His paws cut paths where men could not. Ice sliced between his pads, blood warming the snow for a heartbeat before freezing solid. His lungs boo. And, each breath a knife, yet his pace never faltered. He was not chasing blindly. He was reading the storm the way some read scripture, broken branches, crushed drifts, the sharp metallic stink of fear and sweat. The outlaws were no longer laughing. That scent told him everything. Far ahead, the men were unraveling. They had abandoned the idea of control. Horses were tied clumsily behind a rock outcrop, their sides heaving, eyes rolling white. One animal lay on its side, leg bent wrong, breath rattling like loose stones. The injured man groaned nearby, consciousness slipping in and out, blood frozen into his beard. "Leave him," one of the outlaws shouted over the wind. "If we stay, we all die." The leader hesitated. For the first time since the valley, doubt cracked his voice. "We don't leave our own," the mountain answered with a roar, flinging a curtain of snow that erased the trail behind them. The decision was made for them. They dragged the injured man toward a cluster of stunted pines and collapsed into the shallow shelter, 6 bodies pressed together like frightened children. That was when they heard it. A sound that did not belong to the storm, not wind, not shifting snow, a low, steady growl threading through the chaos like a blade through cloth. One man laughed weakly. "You hear that? I told you. Just a dog," but his hand shook on his rifle. Ash emerged from the white veil without warning, close enough that frost sprayed from his coat as he shook once, eyes locked on the circle of men. He did not rush them. He stood, planted, tail low, shoulders squared, as if the mountain itself had grown teeth. The injured man screamed. Ash lunged, not at the wounded, not at the nearest, but at the man who had torn the clothes from Ellen's line. He moved faster than thought. The man barely had time to raise his gun before Ash was on him, teeth closing around. His forearm. Bone cracked. The scream tore free, raw and wet, swallowed almost instantly by the wind. Gunfire exploded, wild and panicked. Bullets vanished into snow and stone. Ash released and vanished too, melting back into the storm before hands could grab him. Silence followed, broken only by sobbing and the storm's endless scream. "He's hunting us," someone whispered. "No," the leader snapped, though fear shone in his eyes. "It's just an animal. Stay together." They tried, but the mountain had other plans. Ash circled wide, using the storm as cover. He struck again, tearing at a horse's throat, sending it crashing into the snow, screaming until the sound cut off. Panic fractured what little discipline remained. One man bolted, slipping, flailing, vanishing downslope in a white blur. Ash followed. The chase was short. The man fell into a ravine hidden beneath fresh snow, his cry snapping off like a rope. Ash stood at the edge, chest heaving, ears straining. The mountain had claimed one without his teeth. He turned back toward the others. Above, clouds churned like dark water. The storm deepened, colder now, meaner. Back at the cabin, Ellen woke with a gasp. The fire had burned low. The cabin felt too quiet, too empty. She sat up, heart pounding, Ash's absence like a physical wound. She pulled on her boots with numb fingers, wrapped herself in a coat that still smelled faintly of pine and smoke, and of him. Outside, the storm nearly knocked her from her feet. "Ash!" she cried, voice ripped away the instant it left her mouth. No answer, only white fury. She should have stayed, every instinct screamed it. But another voice, older and crueler, whispered that if she did nothing, she would lose the last living thing she loved. Ellen tied a rope around her waist, anchored it to the cabin post, and stepped into the storm, following the faintest hint of tracks. Before they vanished completely, up on the ridge, the outlaws were breaking. They huddled closer, backs to stone, weapons raised in shaking hands. One man sobbed openly now, begging God, his mother, anyone. The leader's face was a mask of frost and terror. "We should have killed it," someone choked. Ash appeared again, closer than before, eyes blazing. He did not attack immediately. He paced, slow and deliberate, forcing them to turn, to waste energy, to feel the cold gnaw deeper with every second. The injured man stopped moving. Ash rushed in once more, dragging another outlaw down, teeth finding throat. Blood steamed briefly in the freezing air. The leader fired point blank, the shot tearing fur, ripping flesh. Ash yelped, a sharp, furious sound, and vanished again. For a heartbeat, hope flared among the men, then it died, because the growl came back, stronger, closer. Ash was hurt now. Blood streaked his side, freezing black. His steps were heavier, but his eyes had lost nothing. If anything, they burned brighter, fueled by pain and memory. The leader backed away, boots slipping. "Stay back," he shouted, though no one was listening anymore. Ash charged. The impact knocked the leader into the snow. They rolled together, man and dog, snarling, screaming, slipping toward the ravine's edge. The leader smashed the rifle butt into Ash's ribs. Ash bit down on the man's shoulder, tearing flesh, refusing to let go even as fists rained down. They slid. Stone vanished beneath them. At the last second, Ash released and scrambled back, claws finding purchase. The leader did not. His scream fell away into nothing. The storm swallowed it. Ash stood at the edge, chest heaving, blood dripping onto snow already stained dark. He turned slowly. One outlaw remained. The man dropped his weapon and fell to his knees, sobbing, forehead pressed to the ice. "Please," he begged. "Ed, please." Ash watched him for a long moment. Then, without a sound, he turned away. The storm finished what mercy began. Below, Ellen collapsed into the snow, rope taut behind her. Through the white blur, she saw a shape moving toward her, low, limping, stubborn. "Ash!" she cried. He reached her and fell finally into her arms. She held him as the storm raged around them, pressing her face into his fur, whispering his name over and over, as if it were a spell strong enough to keep death away. The mountain watched in silence, and somewhere deep within the storm the reckoning was not yet complete. The storm did not end when the last scream was taken by the ravine. It lingered, heavy and watchful, as if the mountain itself needed time to decide what mercy looked like. Ellen dragged Ash back toward the cabin, inch by inch. Every step was a negotiation with pain and exhaustion. The rope burned her waist. Her legs trembled, half frozen, half numb. Ash's weight was wrong in her arms, too still, too loose. Blood crusted his fur where the bullet had torn through his side, dark and sharp against the white. "Stay with me," she whispered, over and over, not knowing if he could hear. "You hear me? You don't get to leave. Not after everything." The wind tried to rip the words from her mouth, but she kept saying them, because silence felt like surrender. By the time she reached the cabin, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the door. She fell inside with Ash, slamming it shut behind them, shutting out the screaming world. The fire was nearly dead. The cold had crept in, bold and cruel. She dragged him closer to the hearth, tearing blankets from the bed, piling them around his body. Her fingers fumbled with cloth and bandages, with anything she could use to stop the bleeding. She pressed hard, ignoring his faint whimper, ignoring her own sobs. "I'm he." She said. "I'm here." Hours passed, or minutes. Time lost meaning. The storm battered the cabin all night, shaking the walls, testing the roof. Ellen fed the fire with the last of the wood, then with broken chair legs, then with pieces of the door frame itself. She sat beside Ash, refusing sleep, afraid that if she closed her eyes, the mountain would take him. At some point, near dawn, Ash stirred, just a twitch at first, then a breath, shallow, ragged, but real. Ellen froze, afraid to hope. "Ash?" Her voice cracked. His eyes opened. They were duller than before, rimmed with pain, but they were his. He shifted weakly, nose brushing her wrist. She broke then, folding over him, tears soaking his fur. She laughed and cried at the same time, a broken sound that filled the small cabin with life again. "You stupid, brave thing," she whispered. "You came back. Of course you did." Outside, the storm began to loosen its grip. Morning revealed the mountain's verdict. Snow lay deep and smooth, hiding violence beneath a clean white lie. Down in the ravine, broken shapes marked where men and horses had fallen. By noon, when the sky finally cleared, the search parties from the valley would come, drawn by missing men, by rumors, by fear. They would find bodies half buried in ice, weapons scattered, tracks leading nowhere. They would tell stories. Some would say the outlaws were taken by the storm alone. Others would whisper about a wolf or a demon or a curse tied to the widow on the slope. A few, the wiser ones, would look at the signs and understand the truth without ever saying it aloud. The mountain had teeth. Ash healed slowly. The bullet had missed his heart by a miracle measured in inches. Fever came and went. Some nights Ellen thought she would lose him anyway, his breathing too shallow, his body too still. But each time he stayed, stubborn, unyielding. Oil beyond reason. When he finally stood again, unsteady but proud, Ellen held him like he might vanish if she let go. Spring came late that year. The snow melted reluctantly, revealing scars, broken trees, churned earth, places where nothing would grow for a long time. No more outlaws rode through the valley. News traveled fast in hard places. Men who lived by cruelty learned to choose other roads. Sometimes strangers asked Ellen about the dog with the torn ear and the eyes that made grown men uneasy. She would smile politely and say nothing. Some stories were not meant to be softened. On quiet evenings, Ash would sit at the edge of the tree line watching the mountains as the light faded. He never chased shadows, never barked at the wind. But if laughter drifted up from the valley, too loud, too careless, his ears would lift and his body would go still. Aylin would rest a hand on his back then, grounding him. "It's over," she would say. "We're safe." Ash would lean into her touch, accepting the words but never forgetting, because some lessons are written in blood and snow, and the mountain remembers everything.